Thank you, everybody, for joining another episode of Best Practices. I'm joined today by Colton Calandrella. He is the co-founder and CEO of Barti. Welcome, Colton.
Hey, Steve. Thanks so much for having me. Long time listener, first time caller. Excited to be here.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad to have you. We've been industry friends for a while. I've been following Barti from a distance and really excited about what you're doing. In a nutshell, what is Barti and how is it different?
Yeah, absolutely. So Barty is the first full operating system for an eye care practice. So our software includes not only the EHR, but it actually replaces 7 to 10 other systems that today are disconnected in the typical practice. So we're the only EHR PM system that also includes the phone. So a lot of practices have their EHR, they have another software for phone and texting, and then one for intake forms, one for online scheduling. We do all of that, which unifies all the data, saves on training time, saves on cost, and really makes the practice a lot more efficient. So at the end of the day, what that means is doctors spend more time with patients and less time documenting and juggling the Frankenstein tech stack that we see in a lot of different places. So really the two big reasons that people are switching to Barty, one is the combination of all these different tools. The other one is our AI functionality. So we have our flagship feature, our AI scribe. This lets the doctor just talk and record all their notes rather than clicking 100 times to document one routine eye exam. And we've partnered very closely with AOA. We're the first and only company that AOA Excel has directly invested in, and we're constantly collaborating with them. We just put in something we call AI guidelines, which took the official AOA clinical guidelines and put it into the chart within Barty. So that's the very high level view, but we're excited that really we're just getting started, and our overall mission is trying to bring the best of software and technology to eye care, which is, as you know, often been overlooked compared to other industries when it comes to technology. I think Anagram is one of the few other eye tech software companies, frankly, that is even in this space. And I think that the more innovation we have, the better. So that's the very high level elevator pitch.
Agree more with that. I think innovation in this space is desperately needed, and grateful to have partners out here doing that. Question that I have for you before we get into the meat of the topic: how did you get into building an EHR, building a PM system? Why are you in eye care?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a masochist building an EHR. It's the software that people love to hate. The long story short is before Barty, had worked on a number of launched other startups and software products, including an AI product at a consulting firm called Bain and Company. While there was doing a lot of healthcare technology work. And the big thing I learned was looking at software for dentists, software for physical therapists, software for autism treatment, almost every other kind of specialty, almost every other part of healthcare has better software than what eye care has. We are truly at the back of the line. And there's a few reasons for that, but ultimately it's been very overlooked. Again, dentistry actually has like 3 or 4 well-funded VC-backed software companies that are trying to build a better system of record. Physical therapy has 3, autism therapy has 3 or 4. There's been no new innovation when it comes to optometry EHR in over a decade, closer to 15 or 20 years. And so that's what got me really excited and thinking, well, why not? Why isn't there something better here? And as we dove in, it seemed like a big opportunity to be the ones pushing the envelope and building something that people really like. So I cold called initially when I was first launching Barty. I cold called 150 practices around the country and asked them one question: scale from 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend your EHR? And the results were dismal. People were talking about spending half of their time documenting in the exam room, 100 clicks to document one routine eye exam, juggling all these different tools that haven't evolved in a long time. And, I partnered up with my co-founder, Dr. Kelly Kai. She's an optometrist, so she's felt the pain herself very acutely. And we decided to embark on this crazy journey of building something better. And, it's taken us a number of years to get all those ducks in a row, but now we really feel like we've built something special.
It's such an important story, and the way you describe the surveys, sort of the NPS score around PM systems, around EHRs, nobody. My experience has been that nobody really likes them, likes what they have. They just have it and know it well enough where they don't want to learn another thing, and they're sort of stuck in that holding pattern, which is often quite unfortunate. The title for this episode, as I see it, is best practices for selecting your EHR or for selecting your PM system. So what I'd love to chat with you about is how does a practice owner go from, they've got a PM system. How do they decide when it's time to make that change? And then if they've decided that, what are the steps they ought to go through to make a good decision for them? I know there are lots of different softwares, lots of different price points. So I would love to get a practical method to make this kind of decision, depending on specialties and the demographics and what your team is accustomed to. I think it's an important conversation, to your point about innovation. Before we dive into it, I want to make one note. We sit today in 2025. And in 2025, to your point, if the software hasn't had any innovation in 15 or 20 years, think about optometry students graduating today. The software they are going to use in your practice is the worst piece of software they've ever seen, right? Like, actually think about it.
Totally.
The people graduating optometry school don't know what Windows 95 looks like until they see your PM system.
Yep. And then they become all too aware. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. You stole a little bit of my answer there. I think one of the most important things, especially now in the age of AI, obviously there's a lot of hype around AI. I'll come out and say it. I'm a big believer in AI. I think it's going to continue to move very quickly. It's going to really transform how operations happen, how clinical documentation happens. And to your point, and we're talking to schools and deans about this, like, optometry students are not going to be documenting the way they are now in 3-5 years. It's going to be totally different. Most of it's going to be through the voice. A lot of it, more of it's going to be automated. And so we all need to be aware of that. And unfortunately, it's no longer a luxury that practice owners have to just make do, because if they do, they're really going to fall further and further behind more quickly than ever before. So I think one of the most important things to look at is future proofing your practice as much as possible. So if you're thinking about your current software, even if it's working today, do you see any evidence it's going to evolve with new technology? And most people have had their EHR for a number of years. And if you really just take even a few minutes and think, like, what was the last major new feature they released? What was the last major update they made? Most of the time I'm talking to people, it's pretty rare that those changes are happening. And if it is happening, it's pretty minor. So I think one of the first questions to ask if you're talking to, or considering a new system, is what are their plans for the future? What are the capabilities they have to make that happen? Do they have a team of software engineers? Or are most of their resources just spent on customer support and sales and marketing? Do they have experts on their team who understand space and who, again, understand AI and the latest technology? If not, then again, you're going to fall further and further behind. So there's the most important thing is, like, where is it today and how will it help your practice? But right behind that is, where is it going to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years from now? The other thing, the other answer I would give, I try to be very data driven. I try to be very objective when it comes to making decisions at Barti. And I always encourage other business owners to do that. And so we have an exercise at Barti we recommend folks to do, which is really do the total cost of ownership of your software. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you need to look at the hidden costs of what your software is or isn't doing today. And so, I don't think the mantra of, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that's not going to capture the whole picture. And so, some of these things, again, aren't necessarily specific to Barti at all, but, like, do you have an intake form that lets patients fill it out ahead of time that goes into the system? Do you let patients book themselves online, which we know from data will lead to 20 to 30% more new patients booking with you? Those are two low-hanging fruits. I'm always shocked by how few practices have those dialed in. Do you have a way for patients to text you in a HIPAA compliant way, which not only do patients love, it actually saves a ton of phone volume, a ton of dial volume for your practice. So again, it's sort of one of those hidden costs. Like all the time spent on the phone is time that you're paying for. And honestly, more important than that, we also know, both from our own call data and other studies in the industry, 30 to 40% of all calls that are made to a practice are missed. They just straight up never get answered. And that means that we have patients who are like, I want to give you my money. I'm having a medical issue, and I'm now going to have to move on to another practice because you just didn't even answer my call when I called. And it's because their staff is too busy. It's because they don't have any backup systems in place. But those are some of like the hidden costs. And again, there's some very low hanging fruit, some things I mentioned that we always encourage people to look at. And then again, the hidden costs of sort of the disjointed, especially double entry of data, for lack of a better word, right? And so do you have an e-prescribe app built in directly to EHR, or are you having to call that in or enter that data separately? How easy is it for your staff to see in one place all the communications with a patient? I see you've had to call 4 or 5 times to get this issue solved. Like, I'm really sorry about that. We need to make sure this gets done right away. Otherwise, we're going to have a really negative patient review. Reputation management. Again, this is something that other businesses have been doing for 15 years now, is trying to make sure they're getting 5-star reviews on Google. And so zooming out a little bit, again, I would say if you're thinking about, well, do I even need to consider another software, spending even 10, 20, 30 minutes doing that analysis quickly of, well, how much time are we spending on having the patient do the intake form in the waiting room? It's usually 5 to 10 minutes all in for the patient to do it and then for the staff to enter it in. That's for every single appointment. It adds up very quickly. So I try to always take like an analytical approach, to make sure that folks are going to then understand what the ROI will be, right? So, in terms of time savings and higher revenue. I think the other piece to consider is what are the biggest barriers to making that change. And so the number one thing we hear all day, every day, you basically said this, is like, I don't like my current system, but I don't want to change. And it's usually because of 2 key reasons. I'm worried about the data migration, and I'm worried my staff is going to kill me if I tell them we're switching systems. So I'm sure you've heard both of those. And those are key questions to consider when you are looking at another solution. Because to be honest, not all migrations are created equal. Some systems are able to migrate more than others. And the training can be another huge issue, where I've sat through some of the training for some of the PMs in the industry, and it's 30 or 40 hours of training. That can be a huge barrier. But if you can find a system, not all systems are like that. Some systems are a lot easier to use. And so those are some of the first questions we usually recommend people start with, is what is the migration process going to look like? If you're a cold start, I think the calculus is a little bit easier on that front, right? You're not having to migrate data, a little bit easier to train staff if they're not used to something else. But of course, change management is something we all struggle with, right? People just don't like change, but that is a muscle that more than ever, I think practice owners need to really flex and get their staff to flex. Because again, whether it's their EHR or other tools, other therapies, new treatments, like, we are in an ever evolving field. And so it's not always the easiest thing to do, but we all need to get good at learning new things, at changing our current systems for something better. So
I often find myself saying, maybe a little too frequently, that the only constant is change. Change isn't optional. It happens. It is happening. It will continue to happen. Your options with respect to change are either you let it happen to you, or make it happen because of you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm sure you see this, right? But there's an ever increasing trend towards consolidation in our space, and much larger players, even larger tech companies now, right? Like every big tech company, their focus is basically smart glasses, right? Whether it's Google investing with Warby Parker, obviously Meta and EssilorLuxottica's partnership. I've heard rumors that Amazon is going to start selling contact lenses in 2026. So to your point, it's frankly not optional to be adopting better things that can better position you. I think especially independent optometry has a lot of advantages. People often prefer to go to and work with and have a relationship with their provider, but there are also um, these other headwinds that we got to deal with, right? And so I think that's where technology though is really exciting because it can help level that playing field. It's not like some of the bigger chains have a monopoly on online scheduling or have a monopoly on better analytics and reporting or have a monopoly on text messaging. Like these are available and many of them are the ROI is crazy good. It's also not like they're prohibitively um, expensive. So, I would say generally so I think those are some topics to think about at a very high level when you're considering switching. I think if you've decided that you want to switch and you understand, hey, there's opportunity here. I'm on a server-based system. That's another key trigger. Usually we see where, and most doctors understand this, like everything is moving to the cloud. It just is what it is. Every business in the Fortune 500 uses cloud-based software. There's no one who uses um, uh, anything else. And so, that's a really important piece. So if you are on a server base, then, you need to be looking at other options. So once you've decided that you want other options, what can you do? What can you do about that? And so you mentioned as well, like different specialties, for example. Um, uh, I think one piece there is customization, right? Some systems are much better than others on what kind of data you can actually collect. And so that's one piece to look at. And then, of course, like who else is using it, right? So understanding if there's any well-known practitioners of if you're a dry eye practice or you're a big myopia management practice, like who are the other people that you know and trust that are using it? Probably the biggest method that we normally hear is like, well, I ask my other friends, like, what are you using? What do you like? And getting some of those positive pieces of feedback is super important. I mean, to be honest, that's how we make a lot of decisions at Barti. I talk to other founders, other CEOs at other companies and say, hey, what's working for you for this? And so I think that's a really important piece too. So maybe I'll pause there, but also happy to then talk a little bit about sort of pricing and cost comparison because I know that that's an important piece as well.
There was a lot there, and I think really valuable. One thing that I'd like to hone in on is you mentioned the adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Super common. People say it all the time, and they say it with conviction. I think what's missed, though, is broke is really poorly defined in that expression and in how people
Yeah.
perceive its value because a lot of what you pointed out, like, does your current PM system allow you to book appointments? Yeah. Can I bill insurance? Yeah. Can I make note of all the exam stuff? Yeah. Cool. Like, okay, it's not broke, but that doesn't mean there isn't stuff to fix. The online appointment that you mentioned, patients, customers, people today want convenience. A lot of folks will say people want what they can't have, or people want too much, or they're entitled, or whatever. And that, whether it's true or not, is sort of immaterial. It is what people want. If I'm going to book an appointment, I would like to do it online. I'm not super interested in making a phone call. If I'm looking at something that doesn't give me a non-phone option, I'm probably going to look for somebody else. And there's no way that practice is going to find out, or that business is going to find out that that's the reason I left. All they should know is they didn't convert a customer. And meeting
Yeah.
patients where they are. Texting is another really important point. Like, is your current PM system broken if it doesn't allow texting? No, but there's a component that you're missing every day that, to your point, lowers call volume, makes communication faster and easier and more convenient. And also, patients, customers, people don't listen to voicemails. They read text messages.
Yeah.
Many of them don't read emails because it's riddled with spam, but they read text
Yeah.
messages.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And that's why I often call it the hitting cost, right? Because to your point, they're not clearly like broken, but you're not seeing a lot of the benefits that you could, and it's funny. I always choose these examples, because as much as I gush about AI, a lot of folks in our industry aren't convinced on these technologies that we've had for 15 years, right?
Right.
I mean, this is an
Yeah.
AdCom. Even the other day, we talked to doctors like, well, do I really need a website? It's like, it's 2025 and I'm still having those conversations, right? And so that's always what checks my optimism with how fast AI will move, because adoption of anything can take a long time. I think one of the other biggest fallacies that I see is that a lot of practices will frankly make assumptions for their patients where they say, well, a lot of my patients are older. They don't want to book online, or they don't want to get a text message. That's just not true. And we can show you studies that actually tell you that even older patients often prefer those things. So it's important, again, that kind of going back to that theme of being data driven and not making decisions off of anecdotes or frankly perceptions or intuition, but trying to maybe do one step deeper of, well, let's sense check that a little bit. Is there any data available? Yeah, Google it. Just use ChatGPT and it'll tell you overwhelming percentage of patients, older and younger, prefer a lot of these things.
There's also an argument to be made
Yeah.
that if you don't make a situation where a younger person can book online, then of course your patients are going to skew older. Like even though
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
absolutely,
Yeah.
even though the data indicates that older and younger people alike want to book online, some of each set of demographics, but there will be a set of demographics of both that don't want to book online. Like, I'm an elder millennial, but I don't speak for every elder millennial. There are plenty of folks who want to make a phone call, who want to come in and see if a walk-in's available. Like, that's not my move, but there are people who do that. And so basically, you can't have operated your business in a particular way for whatever period of time and think it's the same today for everybody. You also have to note,
Yeah.
and I think a point that you made earlier on really important, is to future proof your practice, right? You shouldn't be making decisions for how your practice is today. If you're making decisions to make change to how your practice is today, you're already behind. You should be making
Yeah.
changes to your practice so that it is the practice that you want to have a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you put it really well of like, meet the patients where they are. And what I always say is, more optionality just helps accommodate different people. Where again, if they're like, well, I have an older patient, they don't want to do their intake form on their phone. That's fine. So when they come in, you can still give them a paper intake form. That's great. But what you'll find is actually 80% of patients do want the digital, and they can do the digital. And if they still want to do the paper when they come in, that's great too, right? So you're giving them more optionality. And I think an EHR system is one of the bigger tech decisions you'll make. And so when it comes to future proofing, this is probably obvious, but we have data. People have their EHR on average for up to 10 years. It's a long time. And so, again, do you really think that your practice is going to operate the same way in 5, 6, 7 years as it is today? And you need to make sure you have a technology partner that's really going to evolve with you. So I think more than almost any other kind of technology, because it's such a core part of the operations, that's where you need to be asking those tough questions of what's coming down the pike, what other things are we going to be working on, what's the technology company's vision of the future, and how are they going to evolve to support that. So, and that's also where costs can come in, right? Where you want actually to be paying a certain amount so that they're investing in innovation. To be honest, a lot of prices in the industry are somewhat comparable. But sometimes if the price is too low, like that should also be suspicious, right? If they're charging $200 a month for something, okay, let's call that $2,000 a year per practice. Even if they have 100 practices, right? We're talking like a couple $100,000 a year in revenue. That's not enough to pay one software engineer, right? And so you need to understand. So they're cutting down on support, they're cutting down on innovation, or they're cutting down on both. And I think the other thing, maybe when it comes to pricing, two other things I'll talk about. Again, if you're in the mode of evaluating, you think you need a new system, how do I think about price and budget? So, one quick heuristic I always do from other industries is generally, on average, it's very rough, a business should be spending 1% to 2% of their total revenue on software, not just on EHR, but kind of software in general. That's a top-down approach. The other two important things to know is apples to apples comparison. Unfortunately, this is where there's some work involved, because every EHR packages things differently. Most EHRs have a lot of a la carte add-ons, ancillary charges, where if you add the texting or you add the online scheduling, it's an extra charge per month, which for better or worse, I see a lot of people who say, actually, I'm just not going to add it just because it's an extra charge, even if it's a good ROI. They're not thinking about the ROI. They're just thinking, I don't want to pay more. And they don't like being nickeled and dimed. Some systems, like Barti, try to have it more clear, like packaged. Hey, you get everything all in one. But to do that apples to apples, you really have to look at, okay, if it includes the clearinghouse bill, if it includes the e-prescribe, if it includes all these ancillary services in one, it might be a little bit more expensive than the sticker price of this other one that really is just giving you the core EHR and PM. And so we always encourage people to do the true apples to apples math. I think the other important piece is, I basically already said this, but doing the analysis on the total cost of ownership, where again, it's like, okay, how much you might be saving $100 by not paying for the intake form, but how much more cost of labor are you spending because of that? How many fewer patients are you seeing, right? Because if you can see one additional patient a day, 20 or 30 extra patients a month, that really makes a meaningful difference on your top line revenue and growth.
Let's drill down into that one, because I think the math there is pretty simple, right? The intake form is $100 a month. How many patients do you have to see? Let's say you're not able to, or you don't end up adding any more patients, right? It's just a better process. It's just a faster process. How many patients should you be seeing in a month, where allowing a patient to fill out a digital form instead of taking the time in your office and making your staff member fill it out? Like, how long does it take for you to get your investment back? Because you're thinking about somebody, and let me run through my mental model, and you tell me where I went wrong. $100 a month. Let's say one patient takes, let's say they take 5 minutes to fill out the form, and it takes the front desk person 5 minutes to put it into the PM system. In that case, if I see, let's say 20 patients a day, that's 100 minutes that staff member is spending taking data that a patient gave you from a piece of paper into my software. 100 minutes a day over the course of 5 days. That's 500 minutes a week. That's 2,000 minutes a month. 2,000 minutes a month in hours is that's 33 hours. So 33 hours,
$20
times
an hour, $30 an hour.
So times $20 an hour. So instead of spending $100 to have the intake form, you're spending almost $700 paying somebody to data enter.
Which is crazy, right? So
did I get any of that
you nailed
wrong?
it. No, you nailed it, right? And that's just one small piece, right? And as a business owner, you should be saying, wait, I can get a 5, 6, 7x ROI on this money. I'll do that all day, every day. Even NVIDIA's not going up 7x. Like, I don't know what other opportunities we have to put in $1 and get $7 back, but like, that is the best deal of all time. I'll do that all day, every day. The other easier math that we always do, which is a little bit less scientific, but what do you, and I ask practices this, right? Like, what is your typical revenue per patient? How much revenue, not necessarily profit, but how much revenue do you make on a typical visit? And, I think the industry average is anywhere from like maybe $250 to like $350 per patient. That means one patient, you basically pay for that add-on. So if one appointment out of your 20 appointments a day, or out of your, hundreds of appointments a month, those are all better for the patient and the staff. If you see one more, you can see one more patient, you pay for it, right? Again, that's a pretty low break even point, to consider. And so I often find, I know we've had this conversation before, a lot of times people focus a little bit too much on the cost and not enough on the upside and the ROI, but it's always a trade-off, right? It's like, yes, you got to spend money to make money.
Yeah.
So you nailed it with that analysis, and just looking at what is the bang for the buck that you're getting.
Right. And you mentioned several times hidden costs too. So like, let's take the dollars and cents out of it. How much easier is it for your flow that when the patient comes in, you're ready to take them back? forget
Yeah.
the time, forget the financials. Your patient comes in,
Yeah.
oh, hey, Mr. Jones, welcome in. We've got all your information. Jenny here is ready to take you back and get you started. From a patient
Yeah.
standpoint, what an incredible difference. Because, man, I don't know if everybody else agrees with this, but there is no place I would rather spend no time than a waiting room. I don't care for old magazines. I don't I don't care for stuffy chairs. I hate waiting. Now, part of that is me for sure. But if I come in and they know who I am and they're ready to take me back and I don't have to wait at all or fill out paperwork at all, I'm a happy person.
Yeah.
And odds are
Yeah.
I'm going to spend more money. Yeah,
And you're going to share that
that's
with
right.
other people that are looking for an eye doctor.
That's right.
And so there's all these other actual like hidden benefits too that even if you don't quantify them, they're important, where you just created a promoter out of this patient and they might recommend one or two or a whole family of people to come in because they're so excited about the good experience they had. On the flip side, probably the single biggest overarching challenge I hear from owners is staffing, finding and retaining good team members. This helps your team. This improves the experience where they're doing less double data entry. No one gets out of bed in the morning. No one wakes up as a kid and says, I can't wait to do data entry into a software when I'm older. No one has ever said that. And so if you can save them, again, 5 minutes of double data entry from a paper intake form to the software, you're going to have a little bit easier time retaining that team member and making them feel valued because you're able to have them spend time on things that are more important. So I think
that's a really
yeah,
interesting point
important
too that I hadn't thought about, like the hidden benefit of providing that staff member with support, right? It's not just I'm going to take this bit of work off of your plate. It's I'm going to create a better experience for you every day so that you can do your thing better. There's tremendous value in retention and recruitment for that. And what I said earlier about, your average OD coming out of school has never seen a worse piece of software than the PM system you're probably using, or an older piece of software than you're probably using. The same is true for anybody you're recruiting for your front desk. You're talking about people who have
That's right.
the cell phones, they have smartphones. Like
That's
they
right.
they know what software looks and feels like, and they know that the one that you're about to train them on has too many drop downs. They are not accustomed to the volume of drop downs they're about to have to deal with.
Yeah. They've used Google Calendar and they've used Facebook and they understand, some of these other things don't have to be as hard as it feels like it all is. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And again, that becomes a real barrier for training. Everyone is always having to eventually onboard and train new people. Again, if it takes 40 hours, they're like, do I want this job? And they're coming from other industries where there is better software at work, where they're coming from a dental practice or a physical therapist practice. It's like, oh, well, at this practice, it wasn't terrible. So, when it comes to EHR switching, that's often what we try to hit on first, because again, the first reaction a staff member has is, I don't want to learn something new. But then when we can help them understand, we're going to save you time here, we're going to reduce your effort here, we're going to let you focus on the parts of your job you really enjoy, they go, oh, well, actually, wait, this is something that I really want to have now. Now I'm getting excited about it. So it's important, for us to emphasize those, because ultimately, I mean, that's what gets us out of bed in the morning, is not only saving the doctor time, but the whole staff as well. And so it really should be a win-win across the board. And if it's not, that's going to make it a lot harder, right? And so if for some reason a new system does actually make your staff's life harder or slow them down, like, that's going to be an uphill battle. And so, that's also why we encourage, maybe just going to another broader best practice for evaluating software. And this is true for software or a new contact lens brand, is a lot of owners don't actually know how to bring their team along with them for a decision. And so what is not effective is if you make any decision to say, hey guys, here's the decision, deal with it. It works a lot better if you bring them along, where you say, hey, I'm going to invite you to the demo, or I'm going to share the recording. And like, what do you think? What's your feedback? What excites you? What maybe makes you nervous about this? Ahead of time, they feel heard, they feel bought in, and they're going to be a lot more likely to go along with it. The second big thing is, this probably sounds obvious, but a lot of owners don't even bother to articulate the benefits of a decision. They'll often just communicate the decision. So they'll just say to their team, hey guys, we're switching EHRs. They don't say, we're switching EHRs to replace 5 other things, to save everyone here time, and to improve the patient experience. That's going to be better because of XYZ. They're just like, we're just switching, training's tomorrow, see you on Zoom. and of course that's going to land worse. And so we often spend a lot of our value, we feel, like a little bit in coaching the owner of like how to bring along the team. And again, this all kind of ladders up to change management, which isn't necessarily something that's taught, or again, not like people are changing EHRs all the time, but frankly, this goes to any decision where, again, if you're like, we're going to use different computers or a different contact lens or a different piece of equipment, like why are we switching to an autofractor, or why are we switching to whatever it is? It sounds obvious, but we often see that people skip that really important step of communicating the whole summary to the broader team.
I think bringing the team along is missed, like you said, in a bunch of different decisions throughout the practice. And if you're listening to this and that's something that resonates with you, right? I made this change and I didn't really bring my team along with it, and that change didn't go super well. Like, yeah, that's what'll happen. Their buy-in, their ownership, their desire to make it succeed is what will make it succeed, and the absence of that is what will make it fail. There's a direct relationship there. I think it's obvious, but like you said, also not taught, not really well understood. One other thing I want to touch on before we wrap up this episode is this idea that I have, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So in my role at Anagram, head of growth, I manage our CRM. Our CRM stands for customer relationship management. Our software, that software is designed for us to understand how our customers are doing, who they are, what they're up to, what they want, so that we can better serve them. Now, a PM system and an EHR are not typically positioned as a CRM, in part because that's not what they were necessarily built to do when they were built. Maybe CRM didn't even exist as a concept then. I'm not sure. But increasingly they are that, or in a lot of cases, when you don't have a PM system that does all of the things that you're describing, you've got components of CRMs that feed into, to one degree or another, your PM system. If all of that is true, and I hope that it is, if all of that is true, what's the value for your front desk person, your optician, you as the OD, your technicians, to be able to pull a patient up in the system and know how their last visit went? An example that you brought up also is if they've had to call 3 or 4 times in the recent past to follow up on something, like, what do you gain from having that information? And by contrast, what do you lose by not having it?
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and I think you're right. I mean, that the analogy is very much like the EHR really is the CRM, right? I was just on the call earlier this morning with a big practice. Their number one problem is recall management, is knowing when to reach out to a patient and bring them back to recall them if they haven't been in for 12 months. And that's a perfect example of what a CRM would do. Where same thing at Barti, we have a CRM, right? To manage both new customers and existing customers. And if we sign someone up, if we're trying to talk to a doctor who's interested and we do a demo, and then a year and a half later, I pull up their account and it's like no one's talked or reached out to this person for 18 months. Guys, we dropped the ball here, right? That's a big issue. And then we need to do a little bit of like, okay, well, how are we making sure we're reaching out to everyone in the right cadence? They're in our email newsletters, and the exact same thing for a practice where if you don't have that information, you might totally let people slip through the cracks. I mean, to be honest, that's the biggest cost, right? As I see a lot of people who aren't recalling patients properly, aren't activating patients properly. That's like the lowest hanging fruit, is like keeping the people you already have, right? It's a lot easier and cheaper to keep a patient than trying to get a new one. At the same time, I see that a lot of practices don't think they're a business, and by that I mean a lot of them don't like to do marketing. It's like, well, actually, if you have a patient who would benefit from this procedure, it's okay to send them an email about it. They're actually going to appreciate that. And the ones who don't, that's okay. They're used to getting email marketing that maybe they don't always click into, but that's also okay, right? But if you don't have that information, or for example, if your email marketing isn't connected to your EHR, you're not going to be able to easily reach out to those patients that have dry eye that would benefit from a new dry eye treatment, or patients who haven't been in a certain amount of time, or who have signed up for ortho-K in the past for their other children. So that their new child is also going to be interested potentially in ortho-K. And I think those are some of the things you lose. I think if what you could, and that's what we often see again due to the Frankenstein tech stack, where the data exists, but it's not where the staff is looking in the EHR. It's in their communication software, or their email software, or their payment processing software, um, and not in a centralized place. And so, the value of perfect information, if you want to get really academic about it, is tremendous because it delivers not only better patient experience, but it lets the practice much more effectively retain and grow their patient base. I think, um, yeah, and again, patients prefer that, right? Because it's another common. Another doctor we work with all the time, he says, when I call American Express, like they know who I am because I've called them a million times before. I'm a customer. They know who I am, and they might even know why I'm calling. But how many patients today have that experience where when they call, they say, "Oh, hey, Steve, like, I see you're calling. Is it about the glasses that we've had waiting on the shelf for a week? Or are you calling I see you haven't come in for a year." Like, or even if it's simple, like, "Hey, Steve, like, great to hear from you. Like, how have you been since you last came in a few months ago?" Very, very few practices have that capability today. Instead, it's sort of a one size fits all that uh, doesn't make that patient feel valued, doesn't make it feel like the staff or the doctor really knows that patient.
This is such a key point because when we talk to practices, I spend most of my time talking to independent practices, one, maybe two locations. And when I ask them like why their patients come see them, it's because we care about them. They're our patients. We're invested in taking care of them. And while I don't think practices are being insincere when they say that, I think they mean it. What doesn't happen though is having that translate to every part of the business. Where like, when I was a practicing optician and somebody came in and I have a pretty decent memory for faces and glasses, especially like I'll remember glasses more easily than I will faces. So I'll say, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, love those on you. How you doing?" You could see her light up and whatever she was coming in for is just going to be better because I remembered her off the jump. So give your patients
Yeah,
that sensation, like whatever EHR, whatever PM system you're evaluating. If your current setup doesn't let you give your patient that warm, fuzzy feeling, you're not doing everything you can to retain them. And that's not to say that you'll definitely lose them, but why not open with something so strong?
yeah, agreed. And one of the first feature requests one of the biggest requests we got at Barty is doctors are saying, "I need a place to put those personalized notes for a patient." That's not really a clinical note, but it's like, "Hey, Steve likes to golf," or "Steve had a wedding last year." Those are the gold nuggets that make that person feel so valued when they come back in. And to your point though, can we make that throughout the operations, right? Doctors are often that's top of mind because they're seeing so many patients and having to have those interactions. But are your staff members doing that? Is your billing team doing that? Is your optical team doing that? Where they say, "Hey, looking at your notes, I see that you really like Matsudas. You bought 3 pairs of Matsudas from us before, and we gave you the anti-reflective coating last time. Like, how's that been working out? Have you noticed a difference?" Like, and again, that's going to dramatically improve the experience for the patient. And again, I do think that is actually where independence can differentiate because frankly there's no monopoly on that. You just have to be a little bit disciplined. You need to have a system that gives you that data, and you have to have a staff that is actually cares enough to try to um, build those bridges with patients. But there's no monopoly on that. There's no IP restrictions around that. Any independent can do frankly a better job of that than a much larger chain.
Think ought to, right? It's one thing to say
Yeah,
they could, and obviously they definitely could, but I think it is like business critical that you do because
yeah,
every hook you can put into the relationship makes that stronger. It makes it less likely that they're going to go elsewhere. It makes it less likely that you're going to lose them. It makes it more likely that they're going to be a promoter for you in your community, which is
yeah,
invaluable. Impossible to say how valuable strong word of mouth is in your practice. Colton, I want to thank
yeah.
you for all the insights. I'm going to do a quick recap for the things that I've learned. If I were to summarize, best practices for selecting an EHR are around future proofing your practice. Don't buy software for what your practice is today. Buy with intention for a practice that you can be proud of in a few years. Um, think about when the last time you're given EHR or PM system had a last feature upgrade or made a big change or made an update to how you interact with the software, because that gives you an indication of the investments that the company is making. Think about the total cost of ownership of your EHR, not just what you're paying every month, but what are the hidden benefits? What are the hidden costs? What are you gaining? What are you losing relative to other things and relative to what you already have? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Needs more clarity. That is not a good way to make a decision on its own. And then one thing that I wrote, and I'd love to get your take on, is emphasize your standard of care throughout the process. The EHR that you end up with should allow your standard of care to not just continue, but get better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. A lot of practices, at least on their websites and in person, they'll say, here's all the high tech things, the diagnostic equipment we have and the high tech cutting edge therapies that we use in our practice. But they really don't extend that same thinking to their EHR and their core software tools. But I think you're right. I think you unfortunately don't get a lot of credit for having a higher standard of care unless you're communicating it. A lot of times it's not obvious to the patient what you're doing differently. Frankly, they're not getting an eye exam every other week, or they're not going to different places, right? So you need to sometimes explain to them, hey, this is the reason we have an Optos photo built into the flow, and this is why we only use this kind of treatment or therapy or these kinds of lenses, or these kinds of add-ons to our spectacles. You got to tell them tell them what you're going to say, tell them and tell them again, right? Until that they're able to repeat it. One of my other, as a bit of a side note, but one of my other pet peeves as a patient is the huge lack of basically patient education or follow-up after a visit. So this isn't true to eye care, but most parts of healthcare, a patient goes in and they forget everything 10 minutes after the appointment. They either hear it once, it goes in one ear at the other, or they're confused, or they don't really understand it, and they don't bother to ask, or they understand in the moment, but then again, they just forget. They don't have any kind of record. They don't have any kind of follow-up resources to think about that. So again, those are also practical things that I think the EHR can help with. But I think to your point, emphasizing the standard of care throughout, that's during the appointment booking process. So is your staff equipped to talk about that on the phone? A lot of times you get a call from a new patient. That's really a sales call. They're trying to understand, should they come to your practice? And is your team equipped with just even a few quick talking points of your standard of care and why that's higher and why that matters and why you should care about a proper comprehensive eye exam. And so following that all the way through again to when they come in and they check in, when the technician is doing the testing with them. Here's why we're doing this testing. Here's why this matters to the doctor in the exam room, obviously. And then even afterwards, if they're scheduling, say, hey, actually, we think you should come in for, a follow-up, or, we think that maybe you'd be a good candidate for this dry eye treatment or this ortho K treatment. And yeah, explaining the why behind things is just super important. And I do think that software can play a big role in that.
That puts a nice little bow around the conversation, because what you were describing there was the practice should pull the patient along the process in the same way that the practice owner should pull the staff along in the process when making those kinds of decisions, right? That allows for stronger throughput and more success in every way, basically, you can imagine. Colton, I want to thank you for your time and your insights here. If the folks listening to this want to reach out to you or to Barti, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can reach out to me directly as a CEO. I'm colton@barti.com. Or obviously check out barti.com, has a ton of testimonials from our happy customers, and our pricing is public. So it makes it very easy to do that comparison. And then of course we have experts who are willing to jump on a demo whenever you want and show it to you. So, but yeah, also feel free to reach out directly to me.
Thanks everybody for listening to Best Practices. I've been Steve Alexander. Thanks again, Colton. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot.